because there's talk of a 25-cent to 30-cent gas tax increase. This is a massive increase. So just last week, we saw Mayor Rahm Emanuel proposing a 20 to 30-cent gas tax increase. Right now, the motor fuel tax in Illinois is currently over 37 cents per gallon, plus additional 6 1/4 to 10 1/4 adder to that. This is a massive tax hike. So raising gas taxes by 30 cents a gallon, where would that put us in the rest of the nation? Well, Illinois would have the highest gas taxes in the nation by over 22% over their next highest, which is Pennsylvania. Illinois is already taxed enough. Don't forget that just a year ago, we passed a 32% income tax hike to people. So I'm going to talk about why this is ill-advised for two distinct reasons. So first, we changed the state constitution. So the voters of Illinois changed the constitution to create a road fund lockbox. So remember this, the transportation lockbox constitutional amendment. We changed the constitution so that road funds, fees, taxes go to pay for transportation funds and roads. Now, all this is increasing fees and everything's going up. So no longer can these fees be swept by the governor or the executive branch. So nationally, there's also strong support from both congressional Democrats and President Trump for an infrastructure spending program. Why wouldn't we want to leverage that? Why wouldn't we want our congressional delegation to advocate for Illinois? Why wouldn't we wait and see what this national program is going to look like? Rushing into a massive tax hike is a mistake. Fuel prices are already very low. It's a welcome Christmas gift to consumers. The last thing we need are the Grinch of Springfield taking away that savings from consumers. Furthermore, border communities, counties that are close to the state border, towns and villages that are along the interstate, they depend on sales tax from fuel sales. Right now, you can program your phone to find the best prices for fuel. So trucks driving to Illinois, they can avoid Illinois altogether. That would be a Travis mistake. So I would actually take a look at, so village president of Hampshire, Illinois, Jeff Magnuson, warns that this hike is going to affect his community because they depend on a fuel station next to the highway. So as a Republican legislator who likes to follow the platform of the party, this is a great time for Republicans to unite against hiking sales taxes. So speaking of Republican politics, I also want to introduce my colleague. Now Representative Ives has been a strong voice for financial responsibility, and she was also a candidate for governor, and she received over 350,000 votes, almost 49% of the vote. So I want to bring up Jeannie Ives to the podium right now.
Thanks, Alan, and thank you for calling this press conference on a very important issue, because it's not just about the gas tax. It's about every tax in the state of Illinois, and the gas tax being a very regressive tax at the same time that our governor-elect is proposing a progressive tax on income. They would work in opposite directions of his what he wants to do. And Illinois, according to Wallet Hub, has the highest taxes on individuals in the entire nation. So it's in totality we have high taxes. Specifically with the gas tax, though, we are number 11 in the United States. We're number 1 in our region for gas prices. So I would refer to that chart that I put up hastily prior to the press conference. And if you'll see here, when you look around the area, we overall have the highest gas prices. This is today's data from AAA, who looks at gas prices daily on a daily rate. And you can see also from the chart that we are number 11 overall for state income taxes, or I'm sorry, state gas taxes. What happens when you add on a 25-cent tax, which really is about 26.5%? Well, here's what happens. You just increased gas taxes 71%, making us the highest in the nation. You have to look at this in relative terms. It's not just 25 cents on a gallon. It's the highest in the nation's gas tax. It's the number 1 or number 2 for property tax. It's the overall highest property tax burden in the United States, and this is a disaster. If we're competitive at all, it is on gas prices because we're about middle of the road overall, even though we're the highest in our region. So doing this just makes no sense, no sense. They say they want to protect the poor are most hurt by these types of taxes. So they're regressive in nature. I stand with Alan in opposing this tax. I oppose all new taxes in the state of Illinois. We have not even talked about spending. 25 other states have gotten rid of their prevailing wage rate. We still have a very high prevailing wage rate, which means anything we do, when we use that gas tax money to maintain our roads, we pay more for doing so. So we need to talk about the spend side before we talk about any new taxes. Thank you. We're open for questions, right?
Yeah, we're open to questions.
How would you fund the capital bill?
I would take it out of the existing HIDE. And it's going to mean that you do massive amounts of spending reform and cuts, and it's going to start with pension reform. And until they start doing serious pension reform, they should not be asking for any new taxes or piling on a new debt. It has to come out of our current budget.
And exactly where in the HIDE, maybe the top 2 or 3?
Well, Medicaid reform, pension reform would be the top 2, quite frankly, and then you have to do some additional reform in your agencies. So we've just got to get competitive. DCEO is a bloated agency that could go away. You've got to privatize things that are going on in DHS. For example, with the disability community, there's been initiatives in that area that have been rejected. So every grant line, also every single park grant, you know, the state of Illinois, Wheaton does not need a state of Illinois park grant, and neither does any other state. We are a fiscally bankrupt state, and so all excess goes away until we prioritize what we do. And infrastructure is a priority of state government. It absolutely is, along with public safety and education and taking care of the neediest of the needy among us. But everything ancillary to that needs to absolutely just be cut from the budget. I think people forget that we just passed the 19th unbalanced budget in a row. It's shameful.
President Trump has talked about his support for an infrastructure bill, but 2 years have gone by, there isn't one. Is anyone suggesting that Illinois should wait for infrastructure? There are people in the state that say this needs to happen now. This needs to happen to put people to work to shore up our roads and bridges.
I would argue it's strategic to wait for our congressional delegation to do something. So where's one area that the president and the Democrat Congress can agree? Infrastructure. So this is something that we should push our congressional delegation to work on. And it would be not very strategic for us to raise our taxes here and not see what we can get. I mean, some of these programs are needs-based. So if we go ahead and have the highest sales taxes in the nation, how can we argue that we need the federal government to help our infrastructure? And also that a question about the capital bill. The capital bill isn't all infrastructure, isn't all transportation. So they argue that this is supposed to be for transportation, and according to the constitutional lockbox, it's supposed to go to transportation. Not all the capital bill is transportation.
Not to mention, they just found, what was $170 million for the Obama reconstruction of the roadways. Was that really necessary is that a necessary capital improvement program when you have bridges and roads that need to be shored up instead? They have their spending priorities way mixed up. And they think from this gas tax, I think the number was, somewhere in the realm of $350 million. And then they want to bond it out or use it for that. Well, honestly, how about use first the $170 million going for the Obamacare?
Obama Center.
Obama Center, whatever it is.
Which is an L stop to nowhere.
Jeannie, last week the governor said that he'd look for 4 people to try to replace him on the ballot, even after the primary. What does this say to you about how much our governor cared about running for re-election in the first place?
Well, it's very obvious from your interview, Craig, that he didn't care at all about running for re-election. And this is a man who's lied to everybody about everything, so I don't think anybody should be surprised. The most honest statement that he made the entire campaign was, "I'm not in charge." He should have stopped after that statement and said, "I'm out."
Did you
It
have
would have
any?
been more honest for him to do that for all Republicans, all voters really, because we needed an honest discussion in this worst run state about our fiscal disaster that's coming up. And we weren't able to get that honest discussion from a man who really wasn't interested in the race.
Did you have any inkling of that before or after the primary?
Oh, sure. We had the rumors were flying around my circle of friends that he, and even the three names that have been outed already, we had heard rumors about that. But again, I think it's also a problem that some people knew about this and said nothing. I think they should have, they should have done the right thing and spoken up.
What would have happened if he had called you during his shopping for replacement?
Well, that's what's interesting. You know what? First of all, he doesn't get to make the decision. He doesn't make the call. If he wanted out of the race, then it would have been a decision of the state central committeemen, and who knows what they would have decided. That would have been an open debate, right? But it wasn't his call ever. And the fact that he thought that he could shop around for the right guy and promise the person, loads of money, it's just offensive. He doesn't obviously understand politics, and he doesn't also understand procedure.
Are you getting involved in the 13th Ward automatic?
Yeah, I was about to ask that too. Yeah.
Look, here, I'm a rule of law person, and you're darn right I'm getting involved, and I sent out an email on behalf of David Krupa, who's running against Marty Quinn, who has been labeled as sometimes one of Mike Madigan's generals. And you darn right I am, because it appears that 2,600 people signed a false affidavit, and they should be prosecuted for violating election law. And so I want to see the rule of law enforced, and if my support helps elevate the consciousness of the media and the state's attorneys and everybody else who should get involved in prosecuting these people for filing a false affidavit, then thank God. I hope that happens. I mean, I'm still upset the fact that M.K. Pritzker, the Pritzker's employee, the Pritzker's brother-in-law, and the contractor all participated in a scheme to defraud on property taxes, and nobody has prosecuted them yet. So are we going to allow two sets of rules to exist in the state of Illinois, one for the politically elite and connected and one for everybody else? They should be prosecuted for election fraud, and that's why I'm getting involved.
How much of a difference does it make to you that objection to the petitions was withdrawn?
It makes no difference at all. People still fraudulently filed affidavits and violate election law, and they still should be prosecuted.
You planning to donate to Krupa?
Absolutely.
And how much?
I don't know. I haven't written a check yet, but I'll make him. I'll write him a check.
There are those who say that there's no reason to even go after him because he didn't stand a chance against Marty Quinn at all. What does this say about the Madigan organization that they felt like they had to go out after this no-name 19-year-old?
They're a bunch of bullies. That's what it says. These guys are thugs and they're bullies. And they never won a fair contest because they're worried that if their shenanigans are exposed to the light of day by having a challenger, then they may not win. And they can't have that. They need to own that entire operation down there and all the jobs and all the self-dealing that goes along with it. And so it scares them that even a challenger would, get on the ballot.
I realize you're not a lawyer, but does this rise to the level of a criminal enterprise that could even entangle Marty Quinn or Mike Madigan, even if it was just the workers out there passing the petitions?
Well, I think it should go deeper. I think we should find out not just who signed false affidavits against a young man who's getting a political start, but we should find out who organized this whole thing and who decided which doors we're going to knock. We absolutely should get to the bottom of this. They were trying to bully a man, intimidate him off the ballot. It's shameful. I hope this young man wins.
Yet Madigan always has survived. Why is this?
No. I don't know. Ask him, please. Ask him. I don't know.
What are your thoughts on the protests in France?
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, that's part of the reason we're dressed, similar to them in the yellow vest. We thought it was a great thing to elevate it. They're protesting the same thing that we are, which is high taxes and specifically with fuel taxes. And so my thoughts to them are that their political elite also saw a reason to raise taxes for their own, globalist idea that we got to control climate change. I mean, it's just ridiculous on its face. These people are suffering. It's the middle class, lower class that pay these regressive taxes the most. And so I think that that's why we picked up on their theme. I thought it was appropriate. But Alan.
Yeah, and I'll comment on that. So it's not just France, it's all around Europe, and this is a global issue. And let's not forget, they won. I mean, France actually repealed their taxes, their gas taxes. So the people won in this situation when they rose up and they spoke. And this is a much bigger thing. It's a global issue.
Don't forget, they passed this gas tax. We're #1 in the nation for gas taxes. #1. And it's a 71% increase.
Yeah. And I want to reiterate that dollar amount there. We add 6.25% to 10.25% on top of that, and that is taxed on the per gallon. So we're paying a tax on top of a tax. And once you figure that, it's larger than the 63 cents. So I just want to make sure that's very, very clear. Is that a question there?
Just one other follow-up thing about bump stocks. We're hearing that the DOJ, that there's now a new rule or memorandum that basically banned bump stocks nationwide. Are you aware of that, and is that a good thing?
I hadn't heard that, but I knew that it was something that people after the massacre in Las Vegas had kind of coalesced around. I think at that point, I don't know if it was reactionary or not, but I think even the NRA had put out a statement that they're fine with that. I don't know if they still stand that way. I think that anything that would change something into a functional automatic weapon, and automatic weapons are banned, and possibly that should be banned too. I don't know though that banning them solves the problem. I don't know that it does, but I think it's another way to catch people who may have illegally triggered their weapons up. But I mean, what do you do?
It's also,
I
I
haven't
believe,
heard
the
that.
ATF did have some regulation against anything that caused a repeat fire in the past. So in the past decade, that may have been loosened up, and this might be a clarification on that.
And for the record, I'm fine with that.
So, and I don't know if I've heard the same rumor, but I don't know if it's actually happened.
What's ahead for you, Jeannie?
I'm still figuring that out. I'm still working on Christmas, quite frankly. But I think what I think there's a need for is I think that there's a need for educating the voter. And municipal elections are coming up. You've got 90% of your property tax bill that's going to be on those on that ballot, and yet 20% of people will show up to vote it. And I think there's a lot of lack of information about the details of particular legislation. Like, I don't know that most people talk about this gas tax. Oh, it hasn't been raised since 1991. Well, really, do you think raising it to #1 in the nation is the right idea too? I don't think so. I think that there's got to be more information about every one of these core issues so that Illinois can remain competitive, and so that our kids aren't fleeing this state, and other folks who are trying to make a living here and survive have the ability to do that. So I hope in the future that I'm able to connect better information to constituencies around the state so that they can make more informed choices when they go to the ballot box. I think I'm going to try and work in that area.
Alan, do you see this as actually coming up for a vote in the lame duck session next month?
Rumor has it that this is coming up in lame duck, and strategically, I can't see it how not. They want to have lame duck legislators, both Republican and Democrat, vote on this. And I've been arguing that if we're going to be Republicans and we're going to honor our party platform, that we should unite. This is an opportunity. The Republican Party talks about uniting after a bad election. This is an opportunity to unite against a massive tax hike.
Remember, it's all relative. If you wanted to raise the gas tax in the state of Illinois, then you need to realize we just raised income taxes permanently 32%. Largest increase in income taxes in the history of the state of Illinois, permanent one. We have 1 or 2 for property taxes. So, it just goes on and on and on. #1 overall tax burden. So you can't look at this tax increase in a vacuum. You have to look at it in its totality. That's why, people saying, well, yeah, but Indiana has higher taxes. Yeah, no, they don't. They have a 1% cap on property taxes. Guess what? I'll give you the gas tax if you give me a 1% tax on property taxes. I'll take that trade every day.
Do you feel these taxes will be used to fund government pensions? What are your thoughts?
Well, of course
on
they will
government
be.
pensions?
Of course, they're gonna fund government pensions, they're gonna fund, also Local 150, who does a lot of the road work, they're gonna fund all of those pensions as well. We have very high prevailing wage rates, that's all gonna be factored in. Absolutely, this gas tax is gonna fund pensions. And these are very rich pensions that the private sector does not have access to.
Okay, we have not addressed the cost side of this equation.
Not at
And
all.
Instead of addressing cost side, we've gone straight to the nation's largest gas tax hike.
When you say rich pensions, how much are the government pensions?
You know, ma'am, quite frankly, that's like a 5-hour discussion,
Oh.
and I just can't even go there because once I go down that rabbit hole, we'll be talking about that forever. But I'm happy to give you information on it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim.
Thank you.
I'm gonna bring up Jim Tobin here.
Pensions. Pension millionaires. The top guy gets $598,000 a year in pension. He works full-time right here as an officer around the corner. If he lives to be 85, he will receive $21,518,000 in pension. One guy. There are over 20,000 of these pension millionaires who get over $100,000 a year in pension in the 6 state pension funds. That doesn't even include the hundreds of local pension funds, the city of Chicago. I'm just talking about the 6 state pension funds. This is what's driving Illinois to bankruptcy. This is why they're constantly trying to raise our taxes, to fund the pensions. And really have to be involved in this protest against the gas tax hike. I was involved in the last gas tax hike back in '89. Unfortunately, that was a tax massacre. They passed not only a gas tax increase on June 30, '89, but a number of other tax increases, including sales tax on software and an income tax surcharge. So this time around, we hope to beat them, but it's the pension. That's what's causing the problem. That's why Illinois is bankrupt. There's no way they're going to be able to pay these pensions off with the number of people we have in this state. And every year, the number of people in this state has dropped 4 years in a row. We've lost, I think, 31,000 taxpayers last year. They're moving to free states, lower tax states. People from my office have moved to other states to get away from this taxing problem. And the corruption. Illinois is, of course, the most corrupt state in the country. Chicago is probably one of the most corrupt states or cities in the country. It goes hand in hand with all the money. There's a lot of money to steal here. And they're doing their best to steal it from us. It's legalized theft. That's what these pensions are. Legalized theft. And they're going to drive us, well, we already are bankrupt as a state because of these ridiculous, unnecessary pensions. Oh, and my name is Jim Tobin. Well, someone mentioned that. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
And this time, we're gonna beat the massive tax hike.